The Montana sky stretched endlessly above the plains, burning with the orange and rose hues of late evening. The wind carried the dry scent of sagebrush and dust, whispering across the open fields and the tired fences that framed Dawson Ranch. Emma stood at the edge of the dirt road, her gloved hands gripping the handle of her trunk, everything she owned packed neatly inside. Her stomach twisted with nerves as she waited for the man she was about to marry, a stranger whose words she'd only seen written in ink. A lone wagon creaked into view, its wheels crunching on gravel. A chestnut horse trotted ahead, and beside it walked a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and silent. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low to shade his face from the sun, and a weathered duster that looked like it had seen a dozen winters. When he stopped a few feet away, he removed his hat, revealing dark hair and eyes as sharp as a hawk's. "You're Emma Lane." His voice was deep, quiet, carrying the rough drawl of a man who spent more time with cattle than with people. Emma nodded, her pulse fluttering in her throat. "Yes. And you must be, Mr. Dawson." He gave a slight nod. "Cole Dawson." The air between them thickened. For a long moment, he just studied her, not rudely, but with an intensity that made her shift her weight. His eyes moved from her travel-worn dress to the small trunk beside her feet. "You're smaller than I expected," he finally said, a faint hint of surprise in his tone. Emma's lips parted in protest, but the words caught in her throat. Then, despite herself, she smiled a little. "And you're taller than I hoped," she replied softly, trying to ease the tension. A corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Almost." He looked away, adjusting the reins on his horse. "That all you brought?" "That's all I have," she answered, glancing at the trunk. "I've learned to travel light." Cole picked up the trunk as if it weighed nothing and placed it in the wagon. His movements were efficient, practiced. He'd done everything that way, no wasted effort, no unnecessary words. When he turned back to her, she noticed his hands. Large, scarred, and sun-browned, the kind of hands that had built fences, broken horses, and buried heartbreak. As they stood there, the silence stretched again until it became something tangible, something she could almost hear beating between them. Emma felt the sudden urge to fill it. "You received my letter." He nodded once. "I did. And you're still sure?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Cole's eyes flicked toward her, and for a moment, she thought she saw a trace of something gentle there. "You came all this way," he said. "I reckon we're both sure enough." He reached for the reins again, but his gaze caught on the small wooden box Emma was clutching, the one she hadn't let go of since she left Kansas. "What's that?" he asked. "It's my mother's ring." She opened the box carefully, revealing a delicate silver band, simple but beautiful. "It's all I have of her. I thought, if it fits, maybe it's a sign." Cole looked at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked down at his own hand, large, calloused, far too big for such a fragile thing. "That's too small for me," he said quietly. Emma closed the box, her cheeks warming. "Then maybe it's meant for someone else." But before she could tuck it away, Cole reached out and rested his hand gently on hers. The touch startled her, warm, solid, and steady. "It's not about the size," he murmured. "It's about the fit." Emma's breath caught, unsure what to say. His eyes lingered on hers, blue and searching, as if trying to read every secret she carried. Then, just as suddenly, he released her hand and stepped back. "The ranch is 2 miles north," he said, his tone neutral again. "You can ride up front if you'd like." She nodded, climbing onto the wagon seat beside him. The wooden bench creaked beneath their combined weight, and the air was filled with the soft jingle of reins and the rhythmic clop of hooves. The wind tugged at her bonnet as they moved, carrying with it the distant cries of hawks and the scent of wild grass. Neither of them spoke for the first mile. Cole's jaw was set, his eyes focused on the horizon. Emma stole glances at him, wondering what kind of man he really was. A man who'd lost his wife, if the rumors were true. A man who'd built everything with his own 2 hands, and lost more than most could bear. When the ranch finally came into view, acres of open land, a weathered barn, and a lonely little cabin, Emma felt a mix of awe and dread. This was her new life. A place vast enough to swallow her whole. Cole slowed the wagon near the porch and hopped down to help her. His hand extended again, steady and waiting. When she placed hers in his, their fingers brushed, and something, faint but undeniable, passed between them. As she stepped down, Cole looked at her again, his voice quiet but certain. "Too small," he murmured, as if testing the words. Then, after a pause that felt like a promise, he added softly, "We'll see about that." The days that followed were slow and quiet, each one blending into the next like dust swirling in the evening wind. Emma had imagined ranch life to be hard, but she hadn't expected the silence to be harder still. The cabin stood small and sturdy against the wide, empty plains, a single-room structure with rough-hewn walls, a stone fireplace, and a bed that looked like it had been made for one. Cole moved through his routines with a calm, deliberate efficiency. He woke before dawn, worked the fields, mended fences, and rarely spoke more than a few words. When he did, his voice carried that same steady warmth, a sound that comforted Emma more than she would ever admit. She tried to keep busy. Each morning, she swept the floors, baked bread, and tended to the small vegetable patch behind the cabin. At first, Cole would watch her quietly, as if unsure what to make of her presence. Then, gradually, he began to let her help with small chores, feeding the horses, patching the chicken coop, fetching water from the well. One evening, after a long day, Emma placed a steaming bowl of stew on the table. Cole sat across from her, tired but grateful. The only sound was the crackle of firewood and the soft creak of his chair. "You didn't tell me why you came," he said at last, his voice breaking the stillness. Emma looked up, startled by the question. "Does it matter?" "Maybe not," he said, leaning back slightly. "But I like to know what brings a person to a place like this. Most folks don't come unless they're running from something." She hesitated, her spoon hovering above the bowl. "Maybe I was," she said quietly. "Maybe I still am." He waited, patient but silent. The flicker of the fire danced in his eyes, turning them softer somehow. Emma sighed and looked down at her hands. "My father remarried after my mother passed. The woman he chose didn't care for me much. I wasn't useful, you see. Not strong enough for fieldwork, not pretty enough to marry off easily. When I saw your advertisement, I thought," she paused, searching for the right words. "I thought maybe I could build something of my own. Somewhere no one would tell me I didn't belong." Cole's expression didn't change right away, but there was a subtle shift, a small flicker of understanding. "You're tougher than you look," he said quietly. "The land out here doesn't make room for people unless they earn it." Emma met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'll earn it." For a long moment, neither of them looked away. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was warm, full of something unspoken but real. After dinner, as Emma cleared the dishes, Cole stood and picked up the small wooden box that still sat on the mantel. He turned it over in his hand, his thumb brushing against the smooth lid. "You still have it," he said softly. She nodded. "It was my mother's. I thought maybe we could use it." Cole raised an eyebrow. "You mean the ring?" Emma's heart thudded. "Yes. I know it's small, but..." Before she could finish, Cole set the box down gently on the table and opened it. The silver band gleamed in the lamplight, delicate and impossibly tiny against his calloused fingers. "You sure it'll fit?" he asked with a faint, teasing smile. It was the first hint of humor she'd seen from him, and it made her breath hitch. "I don't know," she admitted, her cheeks warming. He held out his hand, rough, scarred, steady. "Let's find out." Emma hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the ring. When she slipped it onto his hand, it stopped halfway down his thick finger. Her heart sank. "It's too small," she whispered. Cole didn't move. Instead, he met her eyes, his voice quiet but certain. "It'll fit just fine." He gently took her hand in his, guiding hers to press the ring down further. Slowly, the silver band slid into place, perfectly snug, gleaming against his rough skin. Emma's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her hand lingered in his, and she could feel the warmth of his pulse beneath her fingertips. Cole didn't let go immediately. His eyes stayed on hers, soft and searching. The fire crackled beside them, and the wind outside howled faintly through the cracks in the window. Then, in a voice so low it almost disappeared into the night, he said, "Sometimes, the things that seem too small just need a little time, and a bit of care." Emma felt a strange tightness in her chest. Not fear, not nervousness, but something deeper. Something that told her she was no longer just a stranger in this house. When he finally released her hand, the ring caught the light one last time before he turned back to the fire. "Get some rest," he murmured. "Tomorrow's a long day." Emma watched him for a moment, the quiet rhythm of his breathing mingling with the soft crackle of flames. Then she smiled to herself, small and secret, before whispering back, "Good night, Cole." As she climbed into bed, she glanced one last time at his hand resting on the table, the silver band glinting faintly under the lamplight. It fit perfectly, she thought. Maybe, just maybe, she would too. By the time spring gave way to the dry heat of summer, Emma had begun to feel the rhythm of the ranch settle into her bones. The silence that once felt heavy now carried a kind of peace, broken only by the lowing of cattle, the creak of the barn door, and the deep, steady voice of Cole Dawson calling commands across the pasture. Every day began before sunrise. Emma would rise to the smell of coffee and the distant sounds of horses snorting in the corral. She helped prepare breakfast, packed water for Cole, and then spent her mornings tending to the chickens, mending clothes, or gathering herbs near the creek. By noon, she was dusty, sun-kissed, and exhausted, but strangely, she loved it. She'd never felt more alive. Cole had changed too. He spoke more now, not much, but enough for her to notice. He'd ask about her day, offer to show her how to saddle a horse properly, or silently leave a bouquet of wildflowers on the porch without a word of explanation. He was still quiet, but the silence between them had turned warm, comfortable. One late afternoon, as Emma gathered the last of the laundry from the line, a rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. She glanced at the horizon. A dark mass of clouds was sweeping toward the ranch, fast and mean. "Storm's coming," she shouted toward the barn, where Cole was tightening a saddle strap. He looked up, eyes narrowing at the sky. "Get inside, Emma. I'll finish here." But she didn't listen. The wind was picking up, scattering hay and dust. She ran to help him, clutching at her skirts. "You can't do it alone before the rain hits." Cole frowned but didn't argue. Together they worked quickly, closing the barn shutters, herding the horses inside. The storm broke just as they slammed the main door shut. Rain pounded against the roof, loud and relentless. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by a boom that shook the earth. Inside, the two of them stood soaked to the skin, breathless and laughing despite the chaos. Emma brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. "You were going to let me run out there alone, weren't you?" Cole smirked faintly. "You don't exactly take orders well." "I take the right ones," she shot back, her voice playful. He chuckled, a deep, rich sound that made her heart leap. For a moment, the storm outside faded into background noise. They stood close, their breaths mingling in the damp air. Emma could see the droplets clinging to his eyelashes, the scar on his jawline, the way his shirt clung to his shoulders. Cole's voice dropped, soft but steady. "You fit here, Emma. You know that." She blinked, caught off guard. "Fit? I've been trying, but..." He shook his head gently. "No, not trying. You just do. The house, the work, the quiet, it all feels different now." "Better." Her heart tightened. "And what about you, Cole? Do you fit?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. The storm outside roared, the wind rattled the walls, and she wondered if he would stay silent forever. But then, his eyes lifted to hers, blue, intense, and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I didn't think I could," he said finally. "Not after what I lost. But then you showed up with that little ring and that big heart, and somehow," he trailed off, his voice barely above a whisper. "Somehow, everything started to fit again." Emma felt her chest tighten with emotion. She reached for his hand, the one that still wore her mother's ring. The silver band gleamed faintly, warm from his skin. "It really did fit," she murmured, her fingers brushing his. He smiled, soft and almost shy. "Guess you were right." Before she could reply, a loud crack of thunder startled her. She stumbled forward instinctively, straight into his arms. Cole caught her easily, his hands firm around her waist. Neither of them moved. Her heartbeat thundered as loud as the storm, and when she looked up, his eyes were already on her, searching, waiting. "Emma," he began, but she silenced him with a small, trembling smile. "Don't," she whispered. "You'll ruin the moment." For a heartbeat, the world stilled. No wind, no thunder, just the soft rhythm of rain on the roof and the warmth of his breath against her cheek. Then, slowly, carefully, Cole leaned in. His lips brushed hers, gentle at first, as if afraid she'd vanish like the morning mist. But when she didn't pull away, his arms tightened, and the kiss deepened, quiet, sure, and full of everything they'd both been afraid to say. When they finally parted, Emma rested her forehead against his chest, feeling the slow, steady beat of his heart. He spoke softly into her hair. "Too small," he murmured, the same words he'd said that first day, then added, his voice rough but tender, "But it fits just fine." The storm passed not long after, leaving the air cool and sweet. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, the ground slick beneath their boots, the scent of rain fresh in the air. Inside, the fire crackled back to life, casting golden light across the small room that no longer felt lonely. Emma hung up her wet shawl and turned toward Cole, who stood by the fireplace, watching her with that quiet, thoughtful look she had grown to love. She smiled. "I think this place finally feels like home." He nodded, his gaze soft. "It wasn't the place, Emma. It was you." Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, washed clean by the rain, and for the first time, the Dawson Ranch didn't feel empty anymore. It felt whole.